And good morning. Welcome to Studio Church. That kind of an awesome song. It talks all about the power of Jesus and how that lives in us and what we should be doing with that. So let's take a moment and introduce ourselves to each other, and we'll get going here. Yeah. Okay, so here we are on a nice fall, summer, winter day, whatever you want to call it. So we're talking about power this morning. I want to open with Hebrews 4, verse 15 and 16. It says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are. Yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne with grace, with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Now, there's two very important words in there. First one is empathize, and the other one is weaknesses, and that's all power related. So there's no way that you can empathize with somebody who has gone through a circumstance where that reveals their weaknesses, and usually through problems or something like that. And so we can't empathize with them unless we've sort of experienced that. Or we can watch them go through that sort of thing and squirm. And that's a person losing power. They're giving away power by doing that. And so we're going to dig deep into that here today. And so in the natural world, when you empathize with somebody, it can actually create something like guilt or shame in that respect. And the way that happens is, first off, it's an embarrassing situation, and if it's in a public place, then it's even more embarrassing. So that's the guilt and shame that it can create, but it's also in how we approach that person. If we approach that person with harsh words and cutting comments and that sort of thing, then that person would experience that guilt and shame. And when we do that, we're actually attacking that person, and that person is, if they're not strong enough to resist that, then they'll shrink back, and they sort of give away power. They give away some of their power to us as we attack them, and they just sit there and take that. And that's stealing power from somebody, because you're cutting them down, you're hurting them, but so there's that approach, and then there's the other approach where we approach them very gently and just talk to them. Say, is there a problem? Is there something I can help you with? And they have the option then to lash back at you, or to look at you and say, yeah, actually, I could use some help. So those are the kind of the approaches that we're looking at, and how that is approached is the focus of this power that I'm going to talk about. If we degrade people, then it creates negative energy, negative power. And like I said, they give us some of their power. Moses, I want to talk about Moses for a minute here, because he's a pretty good example, leading the Israelites through the desert. And different readings that I've been looking up, it says that they estimate that the people going through the desert could have been close to 1 million people. So how long would it take 1 million people to go through the parted waters? That must have taken quite a while, unless those parted waters were like a mile wide. So that's kind of off topic, but just to give you an example and an idea of the amount of people that we're talking about that Moses was responsible for. He was the judge of all of those people, the acting judge. And he would take these problems to God one at a time. Now, it got to the point where these people were complaining so much about everything that suddenly they took on this manna hate. They had enough manna and they wanted meat. So it says in the Bible that they were standing in the doorways of their tents, and they were wailing because they wanted meat. They didn't want any more manna. So they took that to Moses and started complaining to him about it. So he listened to that and listened to that and listened to that, and finally he took it to God and he said, God, why? Why are you doing this to me? Why did you saddle me with these people that I have to carry around in my arms like little babies? He says, if you're done with me, just kill me. Be done with me. But don't leave me with this. So God heard him. And in Numbers 11:16, it says, the Lord said to Moses, bring me 70 of the Israel's elders who are known as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting and have them stand there with you. I will come down and meet with you there. Wow. Could you imagine? And I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on the 70. They will share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry all this alone. Now, if you can take power off of Moses and put that on 70 more men who are able to do what Moses was doing, how much power did Moses have? That's incredible. Well, first of all, he's the only guy, one of the few guys that actually talked to God and lived. Because it says in the Bible that if you talk to God and you see God, you die. No one can look at God. But Moses did. Met with him a couple times, 3 times, I don't know. And every time he came back, he was just radiating this light. And the people were amazed at what he looked like when he came back from talking with God. This is the guy that spoke face to face with God. And God came into the tent of meeting and spoke with him there. I don't know if that's just an image that they were trying to create, and it was just the ethereal presence of God that was with him, or it was an actual body. It doesn't really say. So we have this power, and this obviously Moses was adorned with this power, and God adorned 70 more to be like Moses, so that they could deal with all of the problems. Now they had 73 people to deal with all these problems within this million people, which is a lot better. So we have the power to think big. We have the power to think crazy things. We have the power to think so many wild ideas that people would just go, whoa, that's too much for me. I can't handle all of your wild ideas. But to us, they might just be normal ideas. So, I mean, we have all of that power. And we have the power to change our lives in very good ways. And we have the power to change other people's lives in good ways. But then we also have that same power to damage people and destroy situations and circumstances and relationships. It's the same power. Whether you use it for negative purposes or you use it for positive purposes, it's the exact same power. There's no difference there. Imagine that you are in charge of a huge complex. Okay, let's use Moses for an example. And everybody's coming to him and complaining. Basically everyone. And I have this 1/3 rule where the 1/3 of the people will be for you, 1/3 of the people will be against you, and then there's the third in between. They're just there. They don't care whether you do it or they don't care whether you don't. It doesn't interest them, doesn't affect them at all, so they don't care. So all of that negativity that Moses was receiving, how did he handle it? He went to God. He went to God and said, I can't take this anymore. Now, we all have that opportunity that when people come at us and attack us, verbally, I might add, not aggressively or not physically, but we have that power that when people come at us, if we're strong on the inside, we can resist that. And we can do it in a nice way. We don't have to lash back at them or tear them to pieces like they're tearing us to pieces, because if they're having a problem and a bad day, then why would we imitate their bad day? Why would we waste time doing that? There's no point to doing that. Now, sometimes when that happens, we realize, that we had no control. And we lashed out at this person, and then suddenly you realize and you go, oh, wow, geez, sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. And that's fine and dandy. I mean, that works, and it happens a lot. It happens all the time. But if we lash out at somebody like that, and then we just leave it and walk away. Now, the reason I say that is I worked with this guy that was like that. He would be the nicest guy, but then all of a sudden you'd be working away and something would happen, and he would just rip a strip off you. And you didn't really do anything. You were just there. And then when he was done, he would come to his senses and he'd go, and he'd walk away. And he wouldn't say anything. So I would say, well, what was that all about? He'd say, oh, don't worry about it. That's just me. That's just the way I am. You just have to get used to it. No, I don't. I don't have to get used to that at all. It's clear in this book that when you do that, you're supposed to go to the person and say, gee, sorry about that. Maybe it was just I'm stressed out. Maybe it's something but I didn't mean it for you to get that. But no, this guy would just leave it. So when you do that, when you snap at somebody and then you walk away and leave it, those are seeds planted in that person's heart. If that person is not strong enough to resist that attack and those innuendos and harsh things that somebody says to you, if you're not strong enough to counter that and to just brush that off like water from a duck's back, so the saying goes, then those become seeds in your heart. I don't know if you've ever met somebody like that, but I met this guy one time, and he was so beaten down. He was so degraded and just destroyed on the inside that he couldn't even look at you when you talked to him, because he was so beneath anything that you could say or do for him. And I recognized this. And I was working downtown in a building, and I kept walking past him, and finally I stopped and I talked to him, and I said, hey, how's it going? He went, oh, not bad. So I put my hand on him and I said, can I pray for you? And immediately he went, yeah. Affirmation. Positive spirit. He was so empty that he couldn't look up, and he couldn't even stand up straight. He was hunched right over. But when I touched him, he stood up immediately, and he was straight as an arrow. That's the power that I'm talking about. That's the power that Jesus gave us when he left this earth. He says, I leave you, and you will do these things. You will do greater things than these. This power, the Spirit, I leave you. And that's the power that he's talking about. And that man experienced that day, and I experienced it that day, because I had no idea that I had that power. But we do. You know, I read this article about unemotional texting. And it was about things like, you know, when people are joking around and they're jealous of somebody, they go, oh, I hate you. Well, they showed this on a page that said, I hate you. It said, define what that means. Well, it means I hate you. What other meaning could it be? But they went into it, and they said, that's why we need computer language that says LOL, I hate you, because it means I'm jealous in a joking way. You see, our mind is filled with facts, and it's filled with knowledge, and it's filled with just cold, hard facts, and that sort of thing. And sometimes when that happens, when people spew out and dump on people, it's just their mind coming out of their mouth. There's no control. They don't think about it. They don't have time to factor it or to filter it through their heart. Because if they were able to filter it through their heart, they would go, whoa, you know what? I don't want to do that because I don't want to experience that. I don't need any more of that in my life. But those kind of people that say that, oh, that's just me, that's just the way I am, it just means your brain is falling out of your mouth and you don't understand. You need to filter it through your heart. And if you have problems and issues that are clogging up your heart, then it can't get filtered through. It just bypasses. It's interesting to note that in mathematics, when you add a negative to a positive, the positive becomes more negative, right? The positive will never increase when you add negativity to it. It just keeps chipping away at the positivity if you keep dumping negative onto it. And that's what that man I told you about had experienced. He'd experienced so much emotional beatings that he was bankrupt. He had nothing left for anybody to do anything for him because he thought he was worthless. But the minute I touched him, he received power. And, you know, the more that I thought about it after, I knew that God was in that moment because I really had no reason to touch this guy. But God says, put your hand on his shoulder, and I just did. He was able to recharge that man. I don't know whatever happened to him, never saw him again, but I suspect that was his start to recovery. I mean, you see this same problem in businesses, you see it in families, you see it in workplaces, in governments, in countries. You see it everywhere in politics, where one politician is absolutely trashing another one and their whole party and their belief system because they want the votes. And they do the same thing. And when you see a political party that doesn't do that, it makes you want to vote for them. Honestly. That's what inspires me. But when you're continually trashing somebody just so you can and make yourself look better as a politician, that doesn't work for me. I don't know about you. I don't need any more negativity in my life, and I don't need any more negativity running the country that's in my life. You know, if that even happens in churches. It's so prevalent in churches that we don't even realize it. These cliques happen where people can be nice, but they can talk about other Christians or other people outside the church, and they can be kind of judgmental. I mean, I don't want to strike at anybody here, but I've heard it sometimes in different places, and it kind of shocked me to find out that I was kind of guilty of that too, and how easy it is, because if you get into a group of people like that, and you think that, yes, we have the answer, Jesus is the answer, but that doesn't give us the license to talk about other people and how they don't get it. And I guess maybe we should be talking more about how we can reach those people as opposed to how to resist them, or how to stay away from them, or how to, well, somebody else is going to do that, not me. Do you get what I mean? I mean, it's not a hurtful thing. It's just a happening that happens. And I noticed it in churches, certain churches. And I'm not going to name any, but it does happen. And it's so incidental. It's so subtle that you don't really see it until one day I was reading the Bible, and I thought to myself, wow, I guess I'm like that. I guess I'm actually like that. And I was alone, but that was an eye-opening moment for me. So God approached me and said, "Why are you doing that?" So I had to take a look at myself. And I had to measure my worth with how the Bible talked about that. And it became very real to me. And that's why I was able to write this message, because all of this stuff sort of filtered through me, and a lot of this stuff kind of rained through me. And I was able to pick up and glean certain bits of it and put it into a paper here. So just to go on, I don't know why I brought all that up, but I guess it needed to be said. But I want to talk about our electrical grid in your home, in this church, in any building you go into. Could you imagine if all of the wiring in here and the protective cover plates and everything else, there were none? Just bare wires. So if you wanted to plug something in, you grab this cord with the two bare metal ends on it, you plug it in the wall. Well, you would experience something that I can certainly talk about. And I got a little story here about that. It's not funny, but I guess it is. I was about 10 years old, and I was sitting on the floor, and I was making crafts, and I had these metal scissors, and I was cutting and whatever I was doing, I don't remember. But it didn't have any plastic handles on it, and I was sitting right beside the wall, and there was a plug right there, and I looked at it and I looked at the scissors, and I thought, wow, that's exactly the same size. Look at that. So I inserted them into the plug. Well, I woke up across the room. It was probably about a 10-foot, 9-foot bedroom or something like that. And I was leaning up against the wall, and my eyes were filled with little black spots. And I looked over at the scissors, and they were bent and hanging out of the wall. And there was smoke coming out of the wall. And I got electrocuted. And the end of that story wasn't as funny as the beginning, because Dad came in and looked at me and said, "What did you do?" So I told him. And we lived in an old house, and so that's not the end of the story. It was on a weekend, and I think it was like a Sunday or something like that, and Dad had to go out and try and get some fuses, because this old house had fuses in it. So he had to drive all over the city to try and find fuses to put in this thing so we could get the power turned back on in the house. So that's my story about power. My first incident with power was that. Now, so that story kind of relates to this next topic that I want to talk about, like the Pharisees. You know, and I think the reason the Pharisees hated Jesus so much is because Jesus didn't put up with their rhetoric. I think they managed people and they controlled people out of absolute negativity. Nothing about them was positive. So they had to be negative about everything. If you made a mistake, it's like those scissors. You had to get seriously burned till there was smoke and rolling across the floor. And Jesus didn't do that. When somebody made a mistake or had a problem, Jesus said, "Go. Your sins are forgiven. Sin no more." The Pharisees hated that, because now they can't control those people, because once they degrade those people to the point where they're so subdued internally that they can't look up at the Pharisees anymore, because you weren't allowed to. That's why they hated Jesus. One of the reasons that they hated Jesus is because he was taking away their power over the people to control them in situations and circumstances that they thought. Jesus freed everybody. If you made a mistake, he freed you. And that's the meaning behind the story where the Pharisees were about to stone the prostitute. And Jesus wrote in the sand, and suddenly they all looked and realized that their lives were a mess. They couldn't stone her because they were far, far more guilty than she ever was. Hebrews 4, verse 15 to 16. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize over our weaknesses, with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are. I opened with that verse, and it's still applicable. We have the power to live according to other people's directives in our lives, so other people can manage us or control us, just like the Pharisees did. You know, something I'm seriously pondering, and I believe that people only say or do things out of motive. They will get you to change, because if they don't approach you face to face and honestly, like the Bible says, is if you have a problem with somebody, go to the person, deal with them face to face. If they refuse to listen to you, go get one or two others and go back and talk to them a second time. But sometimes it's not comfortable to do that. It's not comfortable to approach somebody and say, hey, we got a problem here. You were really quite harsh with that person. Or you were harsh with me. Whatever the circumstance is. We can't look the person in the eye because it's embarrassing. It can be troubling, especially if the person looks like somebody who intimidates us. Then we can be tricked into thinking that, well, I got no authority. I have no power. And that's the wrong thing. That's the wrong approach. That's not what we're supposed to do. So we have power to control those motives, or do we? If we live in a world according to the world's standards, then do we have control of our emotions? Obviously not. If we're going to tear strips off of people uncontrollably, then maybe we don't. We have the power to live grounded lives in the Word of Jesus Christ. The Bible is very clear that how you should treat others. So do that in respect and absolute control. Let's look at Luke 10, verses 1 to 3. It says, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him into every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. That's what we're talking about here. Approaching somebody who didn't have a good day, who doesn't have a good life, who can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. He's the person or she's the person that can't deal with her emotions or can't deal with emotions of other people in her life. They look to us as Christians that there's got to be something better than that. And we are supposed to be the living example of Jesus Christ. When we walk into that room, people are supposed to know it. They're supposed to see it and say, well, whoa. Just like the guy I was telling you about. He says, I don't know what you got, but I want it. That's what people need. They don't need somebody else to tear another strip off of them. It doesn't do any good. All it does is wreck people. It wrecks relationships. And if you make the claim that that's just me, that's just the way I am, that is a blatant, outright lie. It's not the way you are. It's the way you let yourself be. So the 72, they listened. They took the power that Jesus gave them, and they went out like lambs among wolves. And they came back and they said this in Luke 10:17. The 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. Jesus replied, I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice when the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. That's important. We can do that too. We can be like those 72. We can be like Jesus, sending out 2. we're not going to spend time sending out a couple of people that we have to train. So what we can do, there's millions, legions of angels. And all we have to do is call on them, and they will do our bidding. So if you have a situation or a circumstance where you have to go into where the meeting's going to be ugly, or the confrontation you have to make with that person could be aggressive, pray first. Send 2 angels into that meeting, into that interrelationship or whatever's happening there, and let them do the work of God. Let them be the peace of Jesus in that place first. Remember what I said about approaching somebody once the first time, and if they refuse, then approach it with 2 or 3 or 2 or more? That's what we want to do. So if you have 2 angels in there, when you walk in there, you'll experience calm. I've done it. I've tried it. It works. I remember several meetings where I had to go into where I had to make a confrontation with this person. And I prayed for angels. I prayed for angels to go in there. And I walked in there and my heart was just beating really fast. And everybody had a smile on their face. And they shook my hand and they said, "Hey, glad you could make it." I'm going, "Whoa, that's not the way you were on the phone." I didn't say that to him, but I was taken by surprise. I was so surprised that things would turn around like that. And I've done it multiple times, and it works. It truly, truly works. I challenge you. Next time you have something hard to do, pray that the angels go in there first. Then when you get there, the ground's already warmed for you. Now I kept verse 10:16. I kept that out of the previous 7:2 for this reason. Verse 16, Luke 10:16, it says, "Whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me. But whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me." Those are the words of Jesus. So if we go into a place like that and that person is over the top, there's no dealing with them, we don't have to worry, because this next thing I'm going to say, that in Luke 10:5 and 6, it says, "When you enter a house, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If someone who promotes peace is there, then your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you." So if you have a difficult person and that person is absolutely negative, and you can't deal with them, they refuse, or they flat out, they might have a problem with God and Jesus, who knows? There's no dealing with them. But you tried, and you stepped away, and you blessed the house, but it won't stick because it's too negative. So it comes back to you. Mathematically speaking, when you add a positive to a positive, you get more positive. So, sticking to math, the integer being complete, if we imitate Jesus in everything that he says and does, then we should imitate that. We should be whole. That integer of 1. Absolute completeness. And the way we do that is by studying the Bible and reading the Bible. I mean, we can't just hold a book to our head and hope that it sinks in. No, we have to study it. We have to read it. We have to understand that all of this power is available to us. Every bit of it. So I challenge you this week. Here's your homework assignment. You get to build the equation for your peace and joy and happiness and how you interact with other people. You get to build your own equation based on everything that's negative and everything that's positive, and you get to put that into one equation. So when you come out the other side, the answer is balance. Balance. So if you start from 0 and you work your way positive, you become more positive. But if you take a step back and you start going negative, you just keep getting negative. Because if you add a negative to a negative, you get negative. But if you have a positive to a positive, you get positive. Father, I just pray that everyone listening to this message, Lord, that you reach them through this integer of one, this image of Jesus Christ, this absolute wholeness that Jesus presents us and teaches us to emulate. Lord, just pray that you would just make that so prevalent in everybody's minds, Lord. And if there is somebody listening to this message, Lord, that doesn't know Jesus or doesn't have a relationship with you, Jesus, then I just pray that wherever you are, in your place, in your car, in your confines of your own home, just in your mind, all you have to do is say, Lord Jesus, please come into my heart. Take control of my life. I'm tired of this. I need help. I can't be negative anymore. I just pray that everyone that prays that today would find just absolute peace and joy by sending out 2 angels into everything that they have to do, Father. And I just pray all of these things in your holy, precious name. Amen. So thank you. Have yourselves an awesome week. And don't forget your homework assignment. There won't be any test later, but you'll appreciate it in the long run.